So let's talk a little bit just about kind of decentralization in general. I think that this is probably one of the underlying themes across, a lot of what you guys are doing and really just the industry in general. And so there's kind of a couple schools of thought. One is, hey, Bitcoin is the king, Bitcoin will remain the king, and everything will be built on top of Bitcoin. There's another school of thought that is, we're going to take all of the ethos of Bitcoin around decentralization and kind of consensus, and we're going to go apply it in a million different ways with all sorts of different technology and go touch every other industry. And then there's kind of a hybrid, which is like, well, Bitcoin's going to be really important. And that's likely to be the winner in the digital currency space. And then like there's a bunch of other stuff, but they don't necessarily compete with Bitcoin. My guess is that you're in the third bucket, but one, I want to make sure that that's true. And then just kind of explain like everything else other than Bitcoin as you're kind of thinking through decentralization, these other protocols.
Yeah, we're absolutely in that third bucket. Like Bitcoin is the biggest and most important protocol today. It will be one of the biggest and most important things in this entire space. It's the gateway drug for a lot of people. It's like how you get into the space is you sort of get your head around Bitcoin. And then once you start getting your head around Bitcoin, you start realizing that there are a set of things that Bitcoin's phenomenal for and great for. And then actually, if you sort of just tweak the consideration set a little bit or the constraints a little bit, you might be able to do more. And so something as simple as like, yes, technically, there's Bitcoin script and it's programmable. Not quite the way that other platforms are, but like, wouldn't it be great if it were much easier for developers to come in and write these kinds of smart contracts? And that very naturally starts to lead you to something like Ethereum. Or, hey, wouldn't it be great if actually you could tweak some of the parameters and make it much, much better for like micropayments? Like ETH has some challenges around gas fees. And that might lead you to something like mobile coin, which is really optimized for payment flows. And so you can start, I think Bitcoin is really, really important, but we sort of think that there's going to be many, many thousands of tokens. There are going to be many, many thousands of protocols. And they're going to all sort of interop with each other. And we're going to essentially recreate a lot of, in our opinion, what the internet was supposed to be. But it'll take 20 to 30 years. Like, I think we're like in the first inning of this. And so I'm happy to talk about that. I mean, I think the sort of natural one that we spend a lot of time on these days is essentially the smart contract universe. Like, I think one of the most fundamental things here that most people, even people in the space, including ourselves, I think have not really fully internalized is what it means for computers to be able to own money, right? So like if you start from this place of, Bitcoin is money, like the bits themselves are the value. That's kind of a crazy concept, right? It's a bearer instrument. That means, unlike your bank account, when you go to your bank, that's a representation of money. Like you log in and then you got to go to the bank. It's really an IOU from the bank. Which is really, it's funny because then that's an IOU from the government. But Bitcoin is different because you own the bits. And if you own the bits, you own the money. And the way that you assert ownership over the bits is with a private key, which is just another set of bits. And so very quickly you realize, well, doesn't that mean that like a piece of code can create a wallet and have its own private key? And it never tells me what the private key is. And then I could send money into the wallet. And actually now that piece of code essentially custodies the money. It owns the money. And that's a pretty fundamental breakthrough, because what that means is that computers can be counterparties to humans, and there doesn't need to be a human on the other side. Or what it means is that actually computers, like machines, can pay machines. And so once you start playing that out, you're like, wait, so that means like you could do really crazy stuff eventually. Things like you have a self-driving car driving down the street, and enough of them line up and they like all decide to pay the stoplight to turn green. And so you can do like microtransactions, and actually now like all the lights in the city would turn green kind of at the right times, and your traffic would flow more swiftly, and actually you'd be gathering taxes exactly for the streets where there's the most usage, right? Like that kind of stuff. You're like, oh, that could actually now happen, and there need to be no humans in the loop. Like the way you go to the gas station, maybe you like plug in your car to charge, and like using your mobile app, you like fill up the wallet on your car's wallet, right? That kind of crazy stuff can start to happen. But in the short term, you start saying, well, what are these things really good for? And in our opinion, going back to this idea of like money, smart contracts are this really interesting thing, because what they do is they take like $1 quadrillion of stuff that's happening in the world and allow you to express it in code. And so if you think about anything that has to do with money, right, a will or a trust or an escrow or a REIT or a mortgage or a security or a derivative, like literally $1 quadrillion of the world is, here's a pile of money and here's a bunch of rules around that money, like Anthony has access to it, Avichal doesn't. But like in 6 months, Avichal has access to it and Anthony doesn't. So like in some future time horizon, like please execute these instructions. And today we just do that with like spreadsheets and legal documents and email. And like, that's actually how all of that stuff works today. And so along comes something like Ethereum, which is just like, well, I can own the money. And now you can just write those instructions out in code and it's deterministic. Like I can tell you exactly what the code is going to do and there's no way to change it. And that's literally the one thing that computers are better than humans at, is like deterministically executing instructions. So to us, it's just like, literally $2 quadrillion of stuff is going to get eaten up by these kinds of tools. How it happens and stuff, I think it's going to take a decade to play out. We're still in the really early days. I mean, we very well, using a Facebook analogy, we very well may be in the like MySpace era of this, where we kind of are starting to see that this is possible, but actually like we haven't realized how it's going to go mainstream yet. Or maybe Ethereum is Facebook. We'll know in 10 years. But I think we haven't yet really figured out how this stuff is going to change everybody's lives. And I think it's going to change everybody's lives. I think it's going to touch 7 billion people.